We're moments away from the closing bell. I'm Scarlet Fu.
And I'm Joe Weisenthal. Alex Steele is off today. For the day.
Yep.
But as you pointed out, really nice rally, and we're up on the year again.
We're up on the year again, and that gets me to my deep dive. Couldn't get my words out there. This correlation between oil and the S&P 500. We go back 6 trading days, so it takes us back to the start of last week, which is really when volumes start to drop off a lot. There's not the tone for equities.
It does seem like oil sets the tone, but it is also interesting to note that the S&P is not that far off from its all-time highs, while oil has gotten absolutely decimated. So day to day, they often trade together, but the long-term trend has clearly been one of divergence. All right, I want to dive into the terminal and held up pretty well. So there is been this separation. So one of the questions is going into next year is, will these two lines
or will they stay
re-engage,
separate for a while?
Or will there be some sort of separation there? All right, you can see all...
More. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, Mark, I want to go to that chart we were just talking about. We've seen a little bit of a separation between the yield differential and the currency. Do you expect right now on this question, how fast will the Fed be hiking?
Sure. So I think that we get 2 or 3 hikes next year.
Divergence being a widely telegraphed theme in 2015, even though the Fed didn't actually move until earlier this month. What does the new phase of divergence look like in 2016? I know a lot of it depends on how the Fed decides to move and what markets expect the Fed to do, but how will it look in a way that we're not anticipating? All right, Mark Chandler of Brown Brothers Harriman, you're staying with us because coming up, how accurate are today's inflation?
It weighs down on inflation. So if we were to take rent, not the other way around. So one of the best...
Obviously, as you said, core measures of inflation missing badly. And in fact, historically, the inflation...
She buys into this thing called the Phillips curve, which basically says when unemployment is low, we're an economical car because the price of gasoline has dropped. I think people associate...
Here at Bloomberg.
You say 10-year rates will end next year almost exactly where they are now, but you recommend investors avoid the period 3 to 7 year bonds. How come?
Rising only moderately. That's your base case scenario. You also have a scenario where inflation normalizes. And in that...
Famously bearish on treasuries or perhaps over-optimistic about where rates will...
I'm Scarlet Fu. What'd you miss? Let's get to Ramy and Asensio with First Word News this afternoon. Off the high-yield credit market, led by energy names. What are you projecting when it comes to actual defaults in 2016? Sectors as well. Telecom names like Sprint, for instance, have kind of gotten caught up as well. Ability to do some due diligence on what they want to buy. Credit research. What's the theme been for credit research in 2015? How will that change in 2016 given what we've seen in high yield?
To what extent can we isolate the effect, when you talk about high yield?
I'm Scarlet Fu. What'd you miss? It is time for the Bloomberg Business Flash. A look at some of the biggest business stories in the news right now. Calabios is appealing the...
Well, it reflects a bit of both. Mostly it reflects expectations over the next 2 years. What it does...
Reason why this 2-year spread should be so important, and it's sort of something that people programmed in, and then they said it and forget it and walked away?
It's the same as technical...
What I was going to ask, if all of this trading is done via algorithms, what are the opportunities to take advantage of the fact that some of these movements are just based on convention?
As interest rate cuts are considered in those countries. Now, you say the loonie may not be as tied to oil as some people think. Can you explain?
When we talk about these commodity currencies where a currency gets tied to a specific commodity just by habit and because it's always been that way, and then that persists even when economic in Canada.
Indeed.
Well, BlackBerry perhaps not as much the powerhouse as it once used to be. Should Canada be linked to other commodities rather than oil? I mean, are metals a better proxy?
Holding up ex-oil. I mean, there's been a lot of anxiety about real estate and so forth, but if you just ignore the energy component for a second, how is it looking?
Well, on the export side...
Relatively speaking, of course, how much of that is filtering through to Canada?
Your take on that, because that's been one of those emerging market currencies that has a lot of...
Coming up, what you need to know to gear up for tomorrow's trading day next.
Then if it does go positive. All right, don't miss this. Tomorrow, pending home sales comes out at 10 a.m. Eastern time. Remember, we had that existing home sales number that was very weak.